So Brittany is part of France. It has been since 1532, but it retains elements of its independent existence, at least at the time when this song was composed. For instance, and this is relevant, it had certain tax privileges. But there are other ways in which Brittany is different, and one of which you've just heard. It's the language, this Celtic language. But there are also other differences. So this is an example of what's in Breton is called a guetz. It's a long, long narrative song, and speaking Bretons seem to really like these long narrative songs related to a particular place, particular events. And that's very different from French-speaking France, where narrative songs are actually really quite rare. So this is a marker of cultural difference. One of the oddities about that, I think, is that, as far as we know, these songs didn't circulate in any written form. There's no printing really happening in Brittany until, in Breton until the mid-19th century. So these songs only circulate orally. That's, they diffuse over space orally, and they diffuse over time orally. And one of the consequences of that is that of all the many, many versions of this song which have been recorded from between the 1830s and the 1970s, every single one of them is a bit different from the other ones. And historians like Ava use these differences to kind of, why are people introducing these differences? What is this saying? What is different about this community, this audience, which requires this kind of change? Because that's definitely the case with this song, The Death of the Marquis of Pontcallec. So it's mostly been recorded in the Vanité region of southern Brittany, which is the Pontcallec stronghold, the family. But in other parts of Brittany as well. And in some parts, Pontcallec is a hero. He's a great guy. In other parts, he's a really nasty type. So I think in the song, he's cruel and hard in the version that we've just heard. But despite all these differences, this song clearly relates to a particular event. It's about the conspiracy of Pontcallec in 1718 to overthrow the regency in France. It retells the story of his arrest and then his execution in Nantes in 1720. So it's a historical song. I don't want to go too much into the origins of the conspiracy itself. France had just been fighting a series of expensive wars, and that meant the privileges of Brittany and the privileges of its nobles in particular were being called into question because the state wanted taxes from them. And Pontcallec is a local noble, but he's also a smuggler, a salt smuggler. That's actually quite a common combination. He's got a double interest in maintaining the privileges of Brittany. So he tries to set up this conspiracy to get the Spanish in to overthrow the French government. It doesn't work out. He ends up being executed. But the reason why, that's the background. But in fact, the songs themselves don't have an awful lot to say about any of that. Some of the songs say, oh, he was a friend of the Breton people. Some of them, he was a terrible guy, and he seduced women, and he did other terrible things. And some of them, in fact, the majority of them don't say anything about him as a person. They just relate the events of his arrest and then his execution. And that's the real core of these ballads. He's discovered, disguised as a peasant, hiding in the house of a priest. And then he's carted off to Nantes, and then he's executed on the streets of Nantes. So that's kind of accurate. That really happened. So these songs are telling a historical story, but they introduce elements which we're not sure about. So all the songs, I think, say he was betrayed by a beggar. who led the gendarmes to where the dragoons to where he was hiding. But as far as we know, that didn't happen. And they also introduced things which we definitely know didn't happen. So, for example, as he's on the scaffold, his wife appears pleading for clemency, but he never married, so he doesn't have a wife. Some of the songs, he's guillotined. Well, the guillotine hasn't yet been invented. So, yeah, they're both historically accurate and also not historically accurate at the same time. So these kind of songs, Guezio, they engage with history, but as they pass from mouth to mouth, they also respond to more recent events, such as the revolution and its guillotine. And in a sense, this kind of updating makes it feel like you're working within a historical cycle, that events repeat, and the same type of events repeat according to a pattern. And also, they have to work according to their own aesthetic expectations. So the focus, as I say, is never on the causes or the explanations, it's always on the people involved and the emotions that they go through. And so the song becomes less about historical accuracy and more a way about thinking about human relationships, about betrayals and loyalties, about unions and separations. And of course, those kinds of issues are as equally important to the community which is made up of the singer and their audience as it was for the historical actors. So history, memory matters, but there's also other purposes in play in these songs. And I think that's going to be even more obvious in this second example, which is the song, The Capture of Toronto by Papineau.
So this one I'm going to sing in French, a song recorded from this man, Hilaire Benoit on the right. He's an Acadian French-speaking person from New Brunswick, Eastern Canada. And he was collected by Viviane Labrie and Robert Boutillier. We see one of these collectors on the left. So if you speak French, you will understand the story. La ville de Toronto, grand Dieu, qu'elle est jolie. La ville de Toronto, grand Dieu, qu'elle est jolie. Elle est jolie et parfaite en beauté. Papineau, il veut l'attaquer. Papineau fit appeler au yen de ses gendarmes. Papineau fut appelé au yen de ses gendarmes. Grand général, m'envoie vous envoyer, si vous voulez vous rendre à lui. Tu n'es qu'un insolent pour parler de la sorte. Tu n'es qu'un insolent pour parler de la sorte. Tu lui diras que je me fous de lui, autant le jour comme la nuit. Papineau a fit griller tous ses armes de guerre. Papineau a fait griller tous ses armes de guerre. Au premier coup, Papineau a tiré, la ville entière en a tremblé. Toutes les dames de la ville montèrent sur les remparts. Toutes les dames de la ville montèrent sur les remparts. Beau général, apaisez vos canons, 100 écus d'or vous donneront. 100 écus d'or, mesdames, ne sont qu'une bagatelle. 100 écus d'or, mesdames, ne sont qu'une bagatelle. Nous tuerons les petits et les grands, et nous prendrons l'or et l'argent.
So this is a French song. It has a long history in France, although as far as I know, and again, it just circulated orally. There's no printed version. It's got a long history. It's sung about lots of sieges, lots of battles. So there are versions about Turin being conquered by Louis XIII in 1640, Namur by Louis XIV in 1692, Mantua by Bonaparte in 1797. So it's a kind of standard text which you can just update for any war by changing the name of the protagonist, the hero, the general, and the city which is being besieged. And they're a very common genre, siege songs. You don't just find them in France, you also find them in other European countries. And all of them, they mix up the language of love. So the city is a woman who is being wooed with the language of war, so conquest and occupation. So there's that kind of symbol of the city as a kind of intact virgin, preserving her honor. That's a very old, you find it in the Bible. It's, and there is a kind of historical sensibility going on here, because this is a bit how sieges were conducted. There's first a summoning, then if that doesn't work, they build the trenches, they bombard the city. At that point, the civilian population, the women, get involved because they're now under threat. But if the city doesn't surrender at the point where a breach has been made in the walls, then in theory, by the rules of war, it could be given over to the soldiery for 48 hours of rape and murder and pillage. So there's a kind of historically grounded understanding of siege warfare, even if, as we'll see, in all of these cases, this is not what happened. So all of the sieges I just mentioned, so the Turin, Namur, Mantua, there was no sack of the city. So what's been explained in the song didn't actually happen. The garrison marched out after an honorable surrender, flags deployed, drums beating, matches lit. So it's not accurate in that sense. But the version which we've just heard, which is about Papineau's siege and capture of Toronto, is even more fictional in the sense it never happened at all. Papineau was the leader of the French Patriot Party in the, well, not the French, the Canadian Patriot Party in the 1820s and 1830s. There was a Patriot rebellion involving both French and English-speaking Canadians in 1837. It never got anywhere near Toronto. Papineau wasn't in favor of this revolt. I mean, he had to go into exile afterwards, but he hadn't really kind of taken any kind of part. So this is not really an accurate version of history. So what's going on? I mean, it could be a kind of compensatory fantasy. So the population who wanted this victory didn't get it, but they can imagine it. They threatened and took the seat of government. It could also be, and I think it often is, a kind of declaration of political allegiance. So Papineau is still considered a hero of French Canadians and a kind of precursor to French Canadian nationalist ambitions. But one of the kind of odd things about this song is that there were loads of songs about Papineau when he was a kind of active politician. And then when folk song collectors came to collect in the 1880s, 1890s, and later, as you saw, those had all disappeared. This is the one song that is left. It's the only song about Papineau that people remember. So why is it this song which retains its hold on popular memory? One of these interesting things is to think about who's singing this song, where, when, who to, because this is also a love song that speaks to issues within the community. It's a rejoinder to a very common type of song, which is called the pastoral, in which there's a seigneur, a lord, who sees a shepherdess and he wants to kind of, well, I'll let you imagine what he wants to do with her. And sometimes she gives in, and sometimes she doesn't, and sometimes she tricks him. But there's both this kind of, you've got a man and a woman talking to each other, but they're also talking across a social divide. He's higher, she's lower, and that's really kind of symbolized in the song by the fact that he tutoirs her, so he's using the common, the singular version, where she vouvoirs him, so she's being polite to him. Well, in this song, it's the other way around. The general comes along and vouvoirs the city, and the city, the woman, tutoirs him. So it's, the city is socially superior to the general. And so there's a kind of dynamics going on in ways that you can talk about issues within the community because if you think about the kind of face-to-face village communities where these songs were often sung, you can't talk about your desires in a very open way. You can't reject someone's approaches in a very open way, because those would all have ructions within this community. There would be, family interests are involved. So the song can become a way of carrying messages in an impersonal way. It's just a song. This is just a song. It's just the way it goes. It's nothing to do with anything you, me, but the message can get across. But, and here's the thing, it is a love song of a kind, but it's also a song about political allegiances. It's also a song about a memory of an event. It is, in some way, a song about history. So songs are polyvalent communications. They speak at several levels simultaneously. And for us, that's one of the difficulties of trying to use songs as sources. They're not just saying one thing. You have to kind of see who's speaking to who, what's going on. But it is also, I think, one of the fascinations of these kinds of materials as sources. So that's the end of our session. I did just want to acknowledge our singer, Eva Guilherme. And also, I do also acknowledge the original singers of all these songs, on whom we rely entirely, but also the collectors who you saw, because we wouldn't have anything to talk about if people hadn't gone out and done that work. But now, we're becoming much more contemporary, I think. So we have with us Anefiok Ekpudum, who is a writer, a storyteller, a journalist, an award-winning journalist who's working on, documents community and culture in contemporary Britain, weaving social, cultural, and narrative history to explore our realities, the people who are living in the UK now. And he's just published a book with Faber and Faber, Where We Come From, Rap, Home and Hope in Modern Britain, a social history of British rap. So again, people can rush out and buy a copy. And with him, it's Kareem Parkins Brown, who is a poet and also an artist. Both of them are from London. And Kareem works on grime, grief, and humour. And he's just brought out a poetry pamphlet with the publishing company Little Betty. So, if you want to take the... Yeah, you go first.
Good evening everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate it. I'm just gonna open up my laptop here, so I'm stalling for like 10 seconds of time. But as mentioned, my work covers British rap as social history and all of the genres that tie into British rap too, which I'll go into a little bit later in this talk. But when I think about UK rap and grime, I'm often drawn to reflect on the national story of modern Britain and the national story of music in modern Britain. What is included in that story, but also who, what, and where sometimes isn't included in that story. I think to begin this, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite songs, or recent favorite songs. It's called Frontline by a rapper from Coventry by way of Gambia called Parsaloo. And the song centers on a main road in his area of Coventry. The area is called Hillfields. And the song centers on the main road that runs through the spine of that community, essentially. And if you've ever been to Hillfields or been to Coventry, this main road has essentially like 4 or 5 huge tower blocks that kind of loom over the road, like kind of like archangels almost. And then you see there are, of course, like food shops, barber shops, betting shops, everything that you'd find in like quite a common British high street in this way. And locally, the road is known as Frontline, and the song and the music video is shot on this main road too. In the background of the video is his friends, his family, all of his people in the background. And from both, you kind of get a sense of how this one strip of road has shaped not just his life, but the lives of an entire community at the same time. This phenomenon isn't necessarily specific to him as a musician, isn't specific to Coventry either. In many black and working class communities all across the country, there are these roads that are called front lines. They're essentially these roads that run through the heart of a space. Sometimes they've been the staging for protests, for riots. They've been the staging points for like landmark cafes, landmark hangout spots. In Clapham, there's like a landmark kind of domino spot that exists underneath one of the bars there. But all of these areas are kind of been pillars of community, and they've also all featured in music videos, in rap songs, in documentaries. And I've personally been to front lines in Handsworth, in Birmingham, in Peckham, in Brixton, in Notting Hill, in Newport, in South Wales, and more. And in that way, in the way they've been catalogued and kind of archived in music, they've kind of become, UK rap and grime have become an oral canvas for the writing of an alternate history of modern Britain, these deeply local histories that unfold in these corners of the UK, quite quietly, but in these songs quite loudly. Deep in the songs like Frontline by Parsaloo are kind of texts and connected stories of community and identity, personal accounts of sacrifice and loss, of hope and pride, of violence and family and love. But I think collectively, when you take all of these songs from all of these different parts of the UK, they weave together into a kind of social commentary from the margins, and it's kind of a connected reflection of the culture and the people that are forged and have been forged by the same music at the same time. So that was just a little introduction into UK rap as social history in that way. To kind of place you in that, I wanted do a little reading from my book, which kind of emphasizes that process. So I spent 5 years traveling up and down the country to some of the places I've just mentioned. And in that process, I was collecting stories from musicians, collecting stories of their lived realities, but also collecting stories of the history of the communities that shaped them and have forged them at the same time. And what I found from going to these different spaces was rap and MC culture as a culture in itself, not just a musical art form. So I'm going to give you a little reading here. At its essence, British rap and MC culture is an act of narration, a history of a city, a town, a country, now documented and made permanent. They are cave paintings that linger in the ether, reminding us that on this land, in this time period, a community once stood. The soul of British rap lies in these recorded accounts. And since this MC culture took root on these soils decades ago, working class kids, black, white, and brown from towns across the UK have flocked to its tones, their lives glimpsed in song through this string of revolving genres. In genres like grime and UK rap, through others like garage and bassline, jungle music, and UK hip-hop, local realities have been filtered into songs, producing poignant social commentaries of people living in the shadows of towns never seen. The alternate history of Britain has been written in rap, spokesmen and spokeswomen surfacing the lived experiences of their separate but connected localities. And so one thing I learned whilst traveling and doing these kind of excavations and recordings was some people tend to think of rap and music in general as a pastime of sorts, an art form that a few are called to and participate in. So a lot of people's reference points is they might see somebody like Stormzy at Glastonbury or Little Sims at Glastonbury, or these high-profile individuals who have attained a certain level of success and notoriety through their music. But honestly, I think it's more than that, and it's more than just a hobby. For so many, it's been a way of life, as common a part of people's school years and early adolescence as, say, playing conkers in the playground or using jumpers at school as goalposts in football. Rap has been like deeply embedded in a lot of these places for a very long time. And I think that's because when we tend to think of UK rap and grime, we kind of think about them in isolation. So somebody might see, for example, like a Stormzy who came from Croydon and just think his story starts there, but really it starts a long time before that. These sounds and these musicians that are part of these sounds are part of a wider family tree that has existed in Britain for over 7 decades now. So, for example, in Coventry, there's no UK rap without genres like two-tone, or without jungle and garage and ragga, and of course, American hip-hop. Parsaloo, who I was speaking about in Coventry, his best friend is the grandson of Neville Staples, who was in the Specials. So you see like this connected lineage of music that flows through the region, and though the sound changes and the name of the sound changes, the realities that they're speaking about remain deeply the same. If you were to unfurl the lyrics from the first song I was talking about and maybe look at a song from the Specials, the messages are almost identical in what they're saying. The style of music they're performing has changed. Maybe the pace of the music has changed, the accents of the music has changed, the dress in the music videos has changed as culture has moved on and evolved. But the essence of what they're communicating are the same, and they're talking about the same places that have existed, that they both lived in, just at different time periods. So these sounds whose existence have kind of been shaped and sculpted by waves of migration, by people who've come and adapted to the terrain, the politics and the culture of what was once a foreign land, and they've attempted to turn that into home. And I think that connection we see is, I guess, generations of black communities in Britain that have made sense of themselves and ourselves in these new places, kind of giving and feeding off the land and slowly turning British soil into something that can feel like home. But as that process has happened, these experiences have been documented in music at the same time. So sound has been used to mark and catalogue our individual and collective presence. And I think UK rap and grime are very pertinent and prominent examples of that process. And of course, they're part of a wider musical legacy that exists. Going back to Coventry and the frontline again, I think maybe what stresses that point the most is that Parsaloo, who made the song called Frontline, wasn't the only person to make a song about the frontline in Coventry. You can find 4 generations of rap songs about that same specific road with the same specific title, just with different musicians who have either shot music videos on that road or have called it the same title. When I was recording some of these histories in Coventry, I spent a lot of time in like the youth centres and youth clubs in and around Hillfields, and you'd find people we'd play a video from 1995 of rappers in like really baggy jeans, big hats, American accents, even though they're from Coventry at the same time. And some of the young people there who were maybe 12, 13, 14 would be like, who were listening to Parsaloo now would be like, oh, like that's my dad on the screen, or like that's my uncle on the screen. And it was so interesting to see like how connected they were to the music, but how directly that familial connection existed. So it was kind of like, almost I like to think of it as a frontline shedding its stories, and every generation that arrives in this place offers a wider piece of commentary on what it means to belong to that space and time. But I think most interestingly, we can kind of trace the history of these areas through these pieces of music. So, as I said, in the 1995, baggy jeans, big hats, American accents. But if you take it back to the 70s, you had a very strong British Caribbean community there, and there are a lot of archive that exists of pirate radio stations there, of Coventry Carnival that they used to have there, and you see a very different type of black experience in comparison to some of the others I've spoken about. But then as you get to, say, Parsalou's generation, he's from Gambia, so you see the accents start to change, the use of language starts to change, even though, again, they're in front of the same houses, in front of the same shops, but you see how the migration paths have maybe broadened and expanded and evolved in that time period. And these things only really exist or can be catalogued quite accurately through this music that's passed through these regions generation after generation after generation. And you have somebody like Parsalou that's 50 years after some of those early pirate radio stations. And I think sometimes people think these things exist in isolation, but when you actually go and speak to people there who are running the pirate radio stations, they're deeply involved in the community today. So whether that's they're running youth workshops, they're teaching young people how to make music, how to produce music. And I guess there's an understanding that as one sound slips away, it kind of opens new territory for a new sound to emerge and new young people to emerge to practice those sounds at the same time. So despite these changes socially, ethnically, migration-wise, the MC culture remains a constant. Rap, grime, and drill are the latest representation of that. It shows that they're intrinsic to the area, but also how young people experience the areas at the same time. So now we've kind of understand that these sounds are, in parts of the UK, a culture unto themselves, of, as I said, belonging to a wider family tree of sound. But I think there are two sides to this sense of oral history. There is, of course, the narration, which I've spoken about, the musicians themselves who are speaking about their local realities and putting them into song. But I think there's also then the recording of these oral histories at the same time. So say in the early 2000s, when a genre like grime first emerged, and you had these large clusters of teenage MCs, hundreds in different areas, making music, you of course then had their friends who took up other skills, who maybe weren't confident enough to make music themselves. They contributed and participated in other ways. So a lot of young men would become cameramen, for example, picking up family cameras and started to record their friends making music. Some were photographers, like the great Simon Wheatley, who took a lot of these photos, who immersed themselves in the scenes in and around East London. He did some in South London too. These are all from the early 2000s at the kind of blooming and blossoming of an early grime scene where he goes into, this is a pirate radio station in someone's kitchen. This is a group of MCs in someone's bedroom. Someone clearly enjoying the music blissfully in the background there at the same time. But what I'm saying about that is at a young time when young men and women began to kind of pull their kind of scattered memoirs into verses, you had friends who became cameramen and created DVDs for a community to bear witness to what was happening. So a lot of these musicians were recorded on estates, in youth clubs, in parks, at house parties, on local high streets, outside train stations, and so they brought their immediate realities onto recording, kind of painting murals to these backdrops in their songs. But at the same time, the recording of them in these places adds an immediacy to the music at the same time and provides like a really vivid, but also like a deeply, deeply local portrait of the areas at the same time. So the environment that the MCs were a product of and these places that shaped the music were so often referenced in the songs, kind of became the stages at the same time for the recordings. For the final passage I'm going to read, kind of reflects that process. I interviewed a lot of people at a point in Croydon who were talking about the early scene in Croydon in the early 2000s. Croydon, a really interesting place in itself, and relatively new borough at the time in London. You had like a lot of young families moving into Croydon. You had like a big migration centre in Croydon, and it meant that essentially you had like this real mix of ethnicities in the area, but because it was a lot of new families moving to the area, you had the youngest population in London, and you had like the biggest youth population in London at the same time too, which meant it was ripe for sounds that immediately speak to youth culture, like UK rap and grime, to really take root there at the same time. And alongside that, you also had, and I think still have, like the biggest black community in the UK actually exists in Croydon too. So all of these factors made it ripe for a genre like UK rap and grime to take off here. So when I spoke to a lot of the early practitioners at the time, some musicians, some really prominent, some who were recording, some who made DVDs at the time, they would speak about how the sound existed as a culture at the time, but also the role that the actual recording played too. So this reading is going to give you a little sample of that. sometimes outside the Whitgift shopping centre in the town centre, I feel like, yeah, if anyone's familiar with Croydon, you know the Whitgift, or in a bus somewhere else, a boy would start playing an instrumental from his phone. Another would start to spray bars, which means to rap lyrics, and within minutes, a crowd of maybe 10 or 12 strangers turned participants would have gathered. Young kids from around the way tossing the instrumentals back and forth like a frisbee, rapping bars with strangers who in that moment had become kin. A 2004 DVD called Block Patrol captures the early climate in South London, much in the same way a lot of these photos do. It roams the estates and studios and houses in the area, and the DVD captures the dynamic of early 2000s in South London. You have boys are fanned out across stairwells, outside shops, coated in hoodies and caps, the designated rapper or MC often standing in front. In one scene, a Congolese kid called Bobby drops an impromptu freestyle about trying to sell his S-Reg Chrysler. Elsewhere on Walworth Road, boys are chilling in the famed Bagel King restaurant or outside on the high road, double-decker buses streaming past in the foreground. They're either in music studios or out late parked up at side roads, their lyrics grieving over old school instrumentals. And so as you can see, like, despite the geographical differences, we've jumped from Croydon in the West Midlands to, from Coventry in the West Midlands to Croydon in South London. The same sense of culture is present and prevalent. And I think these are where the oral histories of an alternate Britain are recorded, in house parties, on curbsides, in parks, train stations, and more. And the passages and ways of life captured on grainy DVDs and in photographs reflect what these places were like. Front lines in Coventry, Handsworth, Birmingham, Brixton, South and East Cardiff, Liverpool, South Wales, Valley towns, more, Nottingham, Manchester, and more. I think they are really pertinent reminders that on these lands and in this time, a community once stood. That's the end of my talk, but now to kind of give a flavor and kind of give an understanding as to how that exists, I'm going to invite Kareem to the stage to perform some of his work, which kind of, I think, really vividly speaks to those themes of local histories and local oral histories in that way. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, perfect. All right, sweet. Okay, cool. I'm going to do quick little glossary, because no offense, I don't think a lot of you are from where I'm from. Yeah. Light is crack cocaine. Bone is also crack cocaine. A nitty is someone who's probably addicted to those aforementioned words. A new era hat is a baseball cap. Rough Squad was a crew of grime musicians, and Scholar was one of their producers. LimeWire? Yeah, illegal downloading software, yeah. Okay, the Adenugas are a family of phenomenal Nigerians. They've got 2 musicians in their family and a media personality writer, Jamie Skepta and Julie Adenuga, so the Adenugas, big family. Oluwa is a Yoruba name meaning God. Fam is a greeting short for family. Zoot is a joint. Bad mind is a jealous, negative kind of person, yeah? That's the only time you get in a glossary track, this whole thing. All right, cool. I'm writing sonnets because a classic sonnet is 14 10-syllable lines, so that's 140 syllables. Grime is typically about 140 BPM, so I'm writing sonnets about grime because we worship the number 140. This is one of them. It's called Light. He's burning crack right by my gaff, sparking rock like caveman, elbow way up there like a light source. We will sacrifice parts of ourselves to feel good. That's why I see a skeleton smoking bone. My school tie jabs around like a pastor's finger, sniping evil spirits. I have this dream where my block of flats turns to a flock of bats and I disappear with it. When they knock this place down, the dust cloud will turn the skies to a desert for 3 days. And the only thing left will be the nitties and the police. A Nokia ringtone screaming from the debris, and a bunch of new era hats stuck in a tree. This one's called 512 megabyte memory stick. Rottweiler, Pitbull Terrier, cool man fam, but we're not familiar. In a rough squad, I'm still a scholar. New era hat match my trainer. Wardrobe colour coordinator, my block stand tall like middle finger. Man get death threats on a regular, so I have to bear arms like body warmer. MySpace friend, MSN Messenger. Got Sony, Ericsson, and Nokia. Playtime playground freestyler on a rhythm that I got off LimeWire. Them man move sideways, not linear, bad my motive, ulterior. Them man there stay stuck to the wall, just chat and breeze like air conditioner. Private caller, ignorer, FL Studio installer. Big time blue cheese inhaler, Ribena and a pack of Rizla. Don't know Oliver's or Tabitha's, them names just sound like customers. Like Jesus, never been a follower, man refer to God like Oluwa. In summertime, gal look prettier, so boys act sillier, then heaven gets heavier. It gets hot like Nigeria, then Mac 10 spread like bacteria. Man don't really play computer, cause round here first person shooter. We never thought we had a future, but now we do it big like Adenugas. This one's from my pamphlet, you lot. It's called, I Expect the World to End Like This. Doors opening for me like the buildings are sneezing. Scepter on top of a man in. He says, everyone's happy about dying. That's why our skulls are smiling. My friends are planets. When I look up, I am dazzled by my darkness. I expect the world to end like this. I find my young self and say, child of divorce. Division is what multiplied you. Only kidding, I spit in his face. Leave him forever playing catch up. I expect the world to end like this. A zoot just sparked. A couple friends. We've made dinner tables out of our laps. One friend turns to me and says, I wish you were here, Kareem. And this is the eponymous, I love that word, eponymous, titular, if you prefer. This is the eponymous poem from Oyulot. It's called Oyulot. A dirty wine is where your head goes around like this. It's a lot sexier than that, but I don't have the spinal dexterity for that. Oyulot. Adefola is hiding a Mac 10 in her weave. When she dirty wines, she accidentally shoots 3 people. That was the wickedest wine of all time, I said to my friends. My friends have kitchens in their jackets. I have a living room in my eyes. Next summer, when gun fingers turn into handguns, I'll invite the whole world to my party and nobody will take their coats off. When them boys in coats dance, they sound like food hitting a bin. And what I thought was the sound of the air ambulance is really the ceiling fan in heaven.
Well, we're moving from Croydon, but we're sticking with heaven. We have 2 speakers from Scotland. Francis Wilkins, who's a lecturer in ethnomusicology at the Elphinstone Institute in Aberdeen, although she lives on Skye, and she specialises in Scottish and Canadian musical traditions, and she's a musician herself. But she's going to be doing the talking, and with her is Christine Kennedy, who's a Gaelic singer, broadcaster, lives on Lewis still, or no, but was born on Lewis, brought up in a Gaelic-speaking community, and she's a traditional singer who won the gold medal at the National Mod in 1989, and is a well-known spokesman for the Gaelic-speaking community and their traditions. So if you want to come up.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David, for that warm introduction. And to the other speakers so far tonight, I've thoroughly enjoyed both of those presentations. I'm delighted to be here tonight with the wonderful Gaelic singer, Christine Kennedy, who is from the island of Lewis. Christine sings many different Gaelic songs. She's got an amazing repertoire of songs, including Porch de Beal and walking songs, some that many of you may well have heard before. But tonight we're going to be exploring the lesser-known Gaelic sacred song tradition. But first, I'm just going to say a few words about how I became involved in the music and how we both met. As David said, I'm a senior lecturer in ethnomusicology at the Elphinstone Institute at the University of Aberdeen. And the Elphinstone Institute is a centre for the study, the promotion, and the celebration of Northern Scottish culture and traditions. I've been there since 2005. I started as a PhD student exploring gospel singing in fishing communities along the northeast coast of Scotland. And through that research, I became particularly interested in the way that sacred singing is not only an act of worship, but it's also a way of reflecting and reinforcing community and occupational identities. So since 2012, I've been living on the island of Skye on the west coast of Scotland. And a few years ago, I had the opportunity to travel to Lewis to do a bit of research into Gaelic psalm singing. And I had a couple of weeks there and interviewed some singers and attended some church services and recorded some singing. And I discovered quite quickly that along with Gaelic psalms, there's also a whole wealth of spiritual songs and hymns on the islands linked to the strong bardic tradition of the Gaelic-speaking islanders. So the last few years, I've been doing fieldwork all over the region, thanks in part to a fellowship from the British Academy. And just to give you an idea for anyone who's not so familiar with this area, this is Lewis here. And then you have down here, this is Harris, which is actually, people call it an island, but it's actually linked. And then if you go further down, you have the island of North Uist, Benbecula, South Uist, and actually it's not really marked on the map, but just there is Eriskay. This is Barra, and this is Skye. So it looks like it's attached to the mainland. It's not actually, it's an island. And this is where I live, just about right there. So a couple of years ago, I was in North Uist interviewing some singers and recording their singing. And one of them said, "Have you met Christine Kennedy yet?" And I said, "No, I've heard the name, I haven't met her yet." And they said, "You really must meet Christine. She's an amazing singer. She grew up in the tradition. She's got so much knowledge about this tradition, and you really must meet her." So they put me in touch. They gave me her contact details. And a couple of weeks later, I was sitting in Christine's kitchen, listening to some of those stories and hearing some of her songs. So tonight, we're going to do a whistle-stop tour of three main Gaelic sacred singing traditions. We'll start by looking at the Catholic hymn tradition, and this is dominant in the southern Outer Hebrides, in South Uist, Eriskay, and Barra. And this is one of the very few parts of Scotland that was never reached by the Scottish Reformation, and it has remained Catholic ever since Christianity was introduced to Scotland. Still today, almost around 95% of the population of these islands remain Catholic. So we'll go on after that and look at the Gaelic psalm singing tradition of the Presbyterian Church in the region. And the Presbyterian Church pretty much takes up the rest of the Western Isles, so Lewis, Harris, and North Uist and Skye in particular. And then we'll finish off by looking at the more personal spiritual song compositions that can be found all over the Hebrides. And I'm going to now call Christine up to the stage to sing the first song, which is an example of a Catholic hymn from the southern Outer Hebrides.
Tapalaisha, Feskelma, Hachoma, Vikonlarave. This is the beautiful hymn, the Lavichdieste, Hold My Hand, Lord, Always. The Lavichdieste, hori terug naar mij. Naar lachen lennebuis, biechten hem ze biogen. Naar lachen nusper, dog hule bichkorein. Tronjolar turok, koerse trodig. Trohianten dur, gurel jular tochis. Chach diochem masgain, ach fasa surgain. Olien let grasin, gubrach bitlugain. Sned hikken taumorn, jaun nunje. Sjejorg vies vai, visanache dulor.
Thank you, Christine. And that was De Lave a Creaster, or Your Hand, Lord, which was written by Donald John MacDonald and Ishbel T. MacDonald, both from the island of South Uist. And it's one of a large repertoire of Catholic hymns from the southern Outer Hebrides. So although the Mass in the Catholic Church was held in Latin until the late 20th century worldwide, for centuries, in the Hebrides, there's also been a very strong hymn writing tradition. One famous hymn writer was a man called Father Allen, who was a priest stationed in Eriskay in the late 19th century. He wrote a number of hymns, some of which are still sung in churches today, as is De Lave a Creaster. In the late 20th century, there was a worldwide movement towards the vernacularization of the Mass, and this changed musical worship massively in the Catholic Church all over the world. In the Hebrides, this was seen as an opportunity to make the very most of the already strong bardic tradition. And De Lave a Creaster is one of many hymns that was written by Donald John MacDonald and Ishbel T. In the late 20th century. It was only actually written in about 1980 as a response to that. And if you go to many Catholic services on the islands today, you'll hear a lot of the hymns that they wrote at that time. So now we're going to move on to the Presbyterian tradition of Gaelic psalm singing, which is found both in the church and in the home. In fact, unaccompanied psalm singing is still the only form of musical worship in many churches in the Hebrides. It originated in the years following the 1560 Reformation in Scotland. And this was a time when singing in worship was transformed from choral singing in Latin to congregational singing in the vernacular language. It was unaccompanied. All churches did away with musical instruments at that time. And the psalm singing was led by a male precentor, someone who sang the line so that the congregation could repeat it. And of course, this was a time when most people would have been illiterate. So the only way they would be able to learn the psalms was by learning them by ear in this way. So in the Hebrides, over the years, Gaelic psalm singing has become part of a soundscape of everyday life in the communities. You might find it at wakes, at funerals, at weddings, and at times of emigration, when often the last contact people had with the people who were leaving on the emigrant ships would have been to sing a Gaelic psalm together as the ships were leaving. Most people would have learnt Gaelic psalm singing in the home during times of family worship, which was something that all households on the islands, whether they were religious or not, all Presbyterian households would have family worship twice a day, once in the morning and once in the evening. Originally, the melodies of the Gaelic psalms would have been exactly the same as the melodies for the English psalms, but they changed hugely over time. And when you hear a Gaelic psalm being sung today, you'll notice it's very, very slow. There's a very free style in the singing. And the voices don't always move in the same direction, but they tend to work together as a whole. The first two lines of the psalm will be sung together with the precentor and the congregation singing together. After the first two lines, it will become a call and response. So the precentor will sing a line, and then the congregation will repeat that line, but much more slowly and with many more notes used in the singing. Lots of people, when they hear the singing, you'll hear this kind of rising and falling of the voices, often considered a kind of musical reflection of the sea, that kind of ebb and flow of the tide, and a reflection of the seascape, which is, of course, all around the islands. So I'm going to ask Christine to come back up to the stage now to introduce the next piece, a Gaelic psalm.
Yes, the beautiful Gaelic presenting is very much part of my fabric. It's truly in my heart and in my soul, and remains very, very precious to me, although that was not always the way when you had to sing all of these verses every morning, every night. But I can really say that I have no recollection of my life without it. And I've heard it often described as being indisputably the most beautiful sound in the world when done well. And I would like to add that it is also indisputably not the most beautiful sound in the world when not done well. The conclusion will be yours tonight. Now, some of the psalms, of course, have about 176 verses, but you'll be relieved to hear I'm only going to do 2 tonight. Agus y fel Gaelig dyna hastau, as ha mi cwad cael na gadol, wel, nach ma gyfel si sio, agus ha mi nochas gyfel si dalahain cwladam. You're very welcome to join in. It's really easy. You just repeat what I've just sung. So the psalm is Psalm 21, the Chinnis Kilmarnock, or Bianachig, the Vahish Vor, Shin Huguga Gamoch.
Tapalev, Christine, and thank you so much to the singers. It's great to see some singers in the audience there as well. Thank you. And I just got to mention that Christine is one of very few female presenters in this tradition. While the male presenters take precedence in the churches, there have been some women who have learnt the style of presenting in the home and outside of the church, and Christine is one of them. So to finish off, we'll take another look at the bardic tradition, but this time in terms of the more personal, spiritual song compositions. And this is an area where women have really excelled. So while women haven't played an active role in the church, particularly in the Presbyterian church, they've been hugely significant as singers and songwriters in the community. There are lots of very well-known female bards as well as male bards going back centuries, and they often started writing songs as a result of a life-changing experience. One particular reason that people have given is when they've become converted at religious revivals, and there were a number that took place in the 19th and 20th century. And a number of people who became converted during these revivals experienced a sudden ability and desire to start writing songs and poetry. And one such person was a lady called Katrina Campbell. She was from the west side of Lewis. She lived most of her life in Stornoway, the capital of Lewis. And she was converted in 1948 in what was known as the Lewis Revival as a young woman. And almost immediately following that, she started writing songs, initially spiritual songs, but all sorts of songs, and she continued throughout her life and into old age. Many of her songs are very personal to her and also very personal to the people around her. And Christine was telling me just last night, actually, that she met Katrina Campbell, and Katrina gave her quite a number of her handwritten songs a few years ago. So I'm going to hand over to Christine now to sing the last example, which is one of Katrina Campbell's most famous songs.
Yes, this was a lament that Katrina wrote in memory of Ishbel MacLeod, who was the daughter of friends of hers, and Ishbel died very suddenly at the age of 15 and a half. And Katrina's written this song from a mother's perspective, and she describes all the different emotions attached to her loss, the shock, the disbelief, the love and the beauty, the very intense grief, the memories, and most of all, the eternal hope. Sadly, some years later, Katrina suffered the loss of one of her own daughters at a very young age. Je te Seniş yedgay küşünü kiyanon anışa englaunun yor şeyar nurni esar küye heißt gün honig schienen los.
Tafalev Huladernia, thank you so much, and thank you so much, Christine, as well. We're going to hand it back over to David now. Thank you.
More than time.
Well done.
Thank you very much. We're going to stick, I suppose, with the theme of women's voices in sometimes extremely difficult circumstances with our last speaker and also our last performer. Well, they're one and the same. Dr. Razia Sultanova, who's a musicologist, who studied in Tashkent and at the Moscow State Conservatoires. And then she came to the UK. She was at the University of London, more recently at the University of Cambridge, and she's published very widely and internationally on the song cultures of Central Asia and the Middle East. And she's currently working on a British Academy project on songs of resilience, female Islamic traditions from the Balkans. But I think tonight she's going to be talking more about women's voices from Afghanistan. So, Razia.
Good evening, everyone. It's such an honor to be here this evening and to talk about my research and and to sing for you some songs from the area which is very far away from all previous presenters, areas, and it's Afghanistan. As you know, Afghanistan is the country which is situated on the crossroads of the Great Silk Road, and it's the country where many cultures and many histories were mixed together. And if you like to know more about Afghanistan, it's in my recently published book. But today I'm going to talk about why female songs from Afghanistan must continue to be sung. So, since the return of the Taliban in 2021, Afghanistan has become a symbol of tragedy, especially for women. Afghan women are confined to their homes, unable to study, unable to work, unable to leave the house without a male escort. They cannot even see a doctor alone, and the most painful restriction is that they are not allowed to sing. Under the Taliban too, one of the most heartbreaking changes has been the total ban on music. Musicians, and especially women, have suffered deeply. Today, singing and playing instruments are forbidden, and women are no longer allowed to perform, even in private gatherings. Yet for generations, Afghan women have used song to share their emotions, their struggles, their hopes. These songs have been a form of comfort and also a quiet form of resistance. In fact, in many parts of the Islamic world, women were traditionally not allowed to perform publicly. So these songs were passed down in private, from mother to daughter, from woman to woman. today, this unique heritage is in danger of disappearing forever. And that's why I believe we must act. We must preserve those songs, we must study them, we must record them, and most importantly, we must perform them. That's why I choose to sing them, so their voices are not lost. In Afghanistan, and hasn't always been this way, like today, back in 1959, Afghanistan began to modernize. Women entered universities. By 1964, they had the right to vote. And photos from Kabul in the 1970s show women who look just like women in the West, wearing short skirts, long hair, and high heels. In 1978, more reforms were introduced. The government promised equal rights for women and challenged all traditions. But from 1979 onward, decades of war, conflicts, and turmoils destroyed those dreams. And yet, even before the Taliban returned in 2021, there was hope. There was a Ministry of Women's Affairs, there were women's organizations, and some women held leadership roles, even if it was just a small percentage. Afghanistan was a young country with 60% of the population under 20. Every year, over 600,000 people entering the workforce. The country was changing. Slowly, but it was changing. Now, all that progress is gone. Today, Afghan women and girls are silenced. They cannot study, they cannot work, they cannot sing. And that's why I sing, to honor them, to keep their voices alive, to make sure their songs are not forgotten. So, a rich tradition of songs once echoed across Afghanistan, sung by women in homes and villages, celebrating one genre I'm going to talk in particular, celebrating daily life, love, and family. But this vast repertoire is fading away, silenced by the Taliban's ban on music. So I've chosen for you to share one of these songs, which is a wedding song from northern Afghanistan. There are about 5 million Uzbeks living in the north of Afghanistan. And one of the songs, which I learned in Shobergan city when I conducted my fieldwork in Afghanistan, I'm going to sing for you. Here is a short translation of the lyrics. When mothers, grandmothers, aunties, and all female relatives gather dressed in their finest, smiling and laughing, they bring chests filled with gifts. Potters carry the dowry for the bride and groom, and the new families come together in celebration. Songs like this were once the heartbeat of Afghan weddings, full of joy, pride, and community. Okay, let's try. So I would like to accompany myself on frame drum called doira. It's spread all over Afghanistan, and in particular, it's popular used to be popular within female communities. When women gathered together with their children, with their relatives, with their friends, with their neighbors, they used to sing those songs, and by the feelings of the song, by joy, you can see that that was the song of celebration. Hoi, hoi, ulan, ulan dushim, hoi, hoi, hoi, hoi, ulan dushim, hoi, hoi, hammanayor, karandushim, hoi, hoi, hammanayor, karandushim, hoi, hoi. İki sunduk ruhları, rukberade, hoi, hoi, iki sunduk ruhları, rukberade, hoi, hoi, iki goda kelterboy, çay berade, hoi, hoi, iki goda kelterboy, çay berade, hoi, hoi. Kator harbalar, harpasiga hoi hoi. Kator harbalar, harpasiga hoi hoi. Kelin pasho kitoptio, kurpasiga hoi hoi. Kelin pasho kitoptio, kurpasiga hoi hoi. Hoi hoi ulan dushim hoi hoi hoi hoi ulan dushim hoi hoi ulan dushlam kilun chaya aitkin dushim mai hoi ulan dushlar kilgun chaya aitkin dushim hoi hoi. Uzun zincirni 4 aylık hoy hoy. Uzun zincirni 4 aylık hoy hoy. Holalar yakın keladi aytishanlik hoy hoy. Holalar yakın keladi aytishanlik hoy hoy. Zargar qilgan zanjirni usi bo'lmas hoy hoy. Zargar qilgan zanjirni usi bo'lmas hoy hoy. Xudo qo'shgan xizmatni buzib bo'lmas hoy hoy. Xudo qo'shgan xizmatni buzib bo'lmas hoy hoy. Hoy hoy ulan dushim hoy hoy hoy ulan dushim hoy hoy ulan dushim kelgunchaya aytginchiman hoy hoy ulan dushim kelgunchaya aytginchiman hoy hoy. So those songs are now not any longer heard, not at celebrations, not at family gatherings, not even in private. These songs, once marking the happiest moment in women's life, are now at risk of disappearing completely, forever erased by the trauma of the Taliban's second rule. Music crosses all borders, of languages, of time, of culture, and these wedding songs once brought Afghan women together in unity and joy, but today they live only in memory. To close, as someone who has long stood in solidarity with the women of Afghanistan, as a women's rights advocate, as a voice for their freedom and independence, I have tried to express their struggle and hope through music. And now I would like to share with you a song I recently composed. It's inspired by the resilience of Afghan women. It's dedicated to every woman who continues to fight for dignity, for voice, for life. Afghan girls, Afghan women, Afghan girls, my heart aches every time I think of you. My thoughts burn like coals, so fierce, so true. How can we help you? How can we help? How can we help you? How can we help? You are no different from women worldwide, yet you suffer more than most can abide. You are silenced, you are denied, you are silenced, you are denied. How can we help you? How can we help? How can we help you? How can we help? What bars you from walking to your work? From seeing your doctor when you hurt? From growing, studying, and rising high? Why are your dreams left to wither and die? How can we help you? How can we help? How can we help you? How can we help? Are you content to live so confined from family worth which is left behind, from friends once so near but now resigned? We are your sisters, your voices, your friends. We are your sisters, your voices, your friends. Women from lands where hope extends. We are your sisters, your voices, your friends. Women from countries which world has a stance. How can I help you? How can we help you? How can we help you? How can we help you? Thank you very much.